Let's see if I can shake you a little bit. All right, so what does a prophet do specifically?
Guide.
What's that?
Guide. Teaches about or speaks about belief.
Yeah, but and the belief though, it's not just a belief. What makes a prophet is something very specific.
God.
What about God?
The connection and communication.
So a prophet specifically, you've got God, and God speaks to a prophet. And then the prophet's job, therefore, is to then go and talk to the people. So what is the prophet's source of their beliefs? God. And God is a representation. Again, whether you believe in God or not, you can see God as being a symbolic representation of something else. Truth. The idea is that that's the whole foundation of the universe. I've talked to you about that before, yes? The whole foundation of the universe is this thing right here, truth. Whatever is in alignment with the truth is in alignment with reality and ultimately will win. Whatever is contrary to this is going to lose out. And you're going to find that in order to stand against this, you've got to make a lot of really weird leaps that a lot of us would never make in real life, in real conversation. And it's also a scary thing because, again, if you stand against this, then you recognize that you stand against the very foundations of the universe. So what the prophet does is he comes along and speaks truth. Now, as we know, if you try to change the world, what's going to happen to you?
Die.
Yeah, you get shot. You're going to die. I've talked to you about that before too, yes? If you remember last semester. So people who accept their prophets, we don't accept their prophets and then slay them. We don't accept the prophets because the prophets come to us with truth. And the truth makes us uncomfortable because it helps us to, or I guess it forces us to realize we're not always living with truth. We're not living in alignment with truth. And one of the ways that you can know that you're not living in alignment with truth is because you have to do a lot of gymnastics to make things work. So, for example, if you steal my phone, and I ask you, "Did you steal my phone?" and you didn't steal it. You borrowed it for a long period of time without telling me. Now, you see how you're playing Twister to try to make something work?
You created your own truth.
Yeah, and this is the thing. When you create your own truth, what do? You make yourself into God. In other words, God is the author of all truth. Again, whether literally if you're religious or symbolically if you're not religious, it's all the same. So now I don't need God anymore because I can come up with my own truth. Doesn't that take us right back to the story we talked about with regards to Adam and Eve with the fruit? So you can eat any fruit you want, huh? Did God really say? Well, here's why he said it, though. It's an attempt to try to create an alternate reality, an alternate universe with your own truth and your own facts, which, strangely enough, never seem to align with reality. But they do seem to serve me pretty well, don't they? So I was talking to a class yesterday, and I can't remember how it came up, but one of the students in the class mentioned pedophilia. And students were like, it's interesting for me to watch and for us to see now that people online are just like, kill all pedophiles. And then Kyle Rittenhouse kills 2 of them over in the riots a couple years ago, and then people are pissed off about it. Well, he did what you said to do, didn't he? He killed 2 convicted pedophiles. But the thing is, it occurs to me, we don't really mean it. We don't really mean it. It's interesting. So I asked a class yesterday, so why can't an 8-year-old have sex with a 50-year-old? What's wrong with this? Why is this so bad? Because here's what I promise you right now. You guys are going to have that argument with your children. I promise you this. The same way that you guys are having arguments with your grandparents about whether or not transgenderism is a good thing, and it's so freaking clear to you. Of course. And you think that your grandparents are so out of date, so out of touch. Your children are going to be saying the exact same thing to you about minor attracted people. We even have a nice name for it now. And 2 weeks ago, April 17th, the United Nations released their policy paper, basically saying we should get rid of these antiquated notions that pedophilia is wrong. If you want, I can print it out for you. One of my students asked me for it. I printed it out for her. This is one of their policy papers. The United Nations, which is doesn't establish the policy for the world, but certainly directs countries in those directions. Yeah, essentially, and that's what they're looking at, is essentially a way of trying to force countries to accept this. And as you guys sit there with your cringed faces, and I ask you, so what is wrong with it? Are 8-year-olds not able to make those kinds of decisions on their own? Are they not responsible enough? Well, then why the fuck would you give them puberty blockers? Why the fuck would you let them get surgery that is irreversible on their bodies at 12 years old, at 8 years old?
And at what age would they really be considered old enough to make those decisions?
Well, the age we have right now established is 18. But what's funny is, guys, you can't get a vasectomy until you're 25. You know why? Most doctors don't do it. Why? Because you might change your mind. Which is reversible, by the way. And yet somehow, for some reason, we with a straight face, create our own truth and say, 8-year-olds, by the way, you're right. If you're disgusted by the idea that an 8-year-old can consent to that, you're on the right track. You're on the right track. That's a good thing that you're against that. I wonder how many of you will be against it, though, in 20 years, when you get more progressive and you understand more about what Europe says. I mean, the world says. Because the United Nations comes along and says, oh, no. You have to listen to the researchers. Here's what the science says. Science says that they're able to consent. And yet you can look right at it and say, bullshit. No, they can't. They can't possibly understand what they're doing. That's the whole reason for the consent laws, because 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds can't understand the long-term ramifications of what it is that they're agreeing to.
30 years old.
30, 50, 60, why does it matter? How regressive are you? What's wrong? Don't you believe the science? Are you against the United Nations? My God. We need to cancel her.
Cancel culture.
Yeah. But here's the problem. You've already walked down that path, man. You've walked down that path without realizing it, without thinking about the long-term ramifications of it. It's just like, well, but don't we want people to just be accepted? Yeah, that's a good thing. It is. But understand where that's going to take you down the road. And once you say, oh no, 12-year-olds can completely understand their situation, and they can completely give consent to life-altering medications that are irreversible, by the way, although they'll say they're reversible, they're really not. Look at what the data says. It's one of the great things about being a researcher. You can read what the data says. And they should be allowed to consent to irreversible surgeries on their body. And if you read about what these surgeries are, I don't know that 12-year-old can understand that. We want, out of one side of our mouth, we want to say, oh no, dude, a 12-year-old can completely understand what they are. But we shouldn't allow them to make these other decisions, which are not nearly as life-altering, which are not nearly as unhistorically supported. I'll say that. I guess maybe the thing is, shouldn't you be horrified by both? Or shouldn't you be accepting of both? Because as soon as you accept one, you can't really reject the other. Either kids are able to understand long-term ramifications of their decisions, or they're not. And by the way, I wonder how many of you in here right now look back to yourselves when you were freshmen. Are you the same person, going back to what she was saying? Are you the same person that you were as a freshman? No. What's that? But you see how hard you have to twist the truth. The obvious, clear thing in front of you. Any of you guys babysit little kids, 10, 12 years old? Yeah, I coach little kids who are like 8 and 10 years old, 5 years old, 4 years old. The other kids can't even, and I'm thinking like, I'll tell them, when you're on your knees, you can jump up. And they can't even do that. It's not because they're physically incapable of doing it. Incapable of doing it. It's because they just, they're little kids. And yet, we want to say that they can make life-altering. How committed to an ideology and how against the truth do you have to be to accept that? Well, what are you saying, Sam? Should we reject it? Well, I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do, except for stay consistent. And if there's one that absolutely has you recoiling in disgust, I wonder why the exact same corollary case has you saying, but it's understanding about them. I don't know. Stay consistent. Now start to think about what other things. Well, if a 12-year-old can do that, why can't 12-year-olds drive cars? Why can't 12-year-olds vote? Why can't 12-year-olds get a job? Why do we have to protect them? Why do there have to be child labor laws to protect them? Because in every area of life we understand, they don't understand the ramifications of the decisions that they make. And yet for some reason we want to carve out one little area and say, except in this one, which is the one that's completely irreversible. I don't know. Do we really care about kids? Or are we just giving lip service to it because it makes us feel like we're doing something good in the world? Sometimes doing the truth, what happens if you do that? I told you. Yeah, you get shot. Sometimes sometimes the prophet becomes the martyr. Sometimes the person is going to be attacked. I know I'm going to be attacked from telling you right now. People are going to hear weird shit from me. Some of you right now are hearing, so we should allow 8-year-olds to date 60-year-olds? That's not what I'm saying. I said exactly the opposite of that. Oh, Scallon hates transgender people. Didn't say that. Said nothing at all like that at all. All I'm doing is I'm coming to you and saying, here's what is consistent. So which one do you choose? You know what? Fuck this guy. He wants us to examine things logically. He wants us to actually have to face these hard truths. You know what's easier? Let's just kill him. Or let's just dox him. Or let's just complain and get him fired. That'd be even better, yeah. And then we can go on social media. Maybe he'll hear about it someday because he's not on there. But it doesn't have to necessarily be slaying a martyr. Sometimes it's just going after someone who tells you the truth. All that they've done is shown you a possible way of looking at the world. And yet we attack them because we don't really want truth. What we want is to create our own truth. What we want is to create our own universe, but without all the hard work of doing it. I guess what I'm saying is that we all want to be gods. And I guess what I'm ultimately saying, therefore, is we realize we can't be. But the next best thing to being a god is to be the serpent in the garden. In other words, if you're so angry that you actually reject the foundations of the universe, that you're willing to lie and deceive, knowing you're going to lose, isn't that exactly what the serpent does? The serpent knows he's going to lose. He does it anyway. Why? Tear down as much as possible in the process. Gods and devils, which one are you? Someone who creates and builds on the foundations of the truth? Or are you somebody who comes along and seeks to destroy? I don't know. Both options are available. One seems to be safer right now, socially, than the other. I'll let you figure out which. That's all. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?